Well, to my fellow students, it is practically 11 o'clock in the morning. It is the 28th of Thursday of October of 2001. This is for the English 230 class. And to the professor, dear fellow. Professor, I may seem like a bit of an out-of-sorts gentleman and character at this point, especially when it came down for today's class. When you were trying to talk about the sublime and beauty, originally I was trying to focus my head not on today's lesson, because I already figured out that Dante's Inferno was definitely more complicated in dealing with it, because I've been trying to listen to certain courses that are getting me up to speed on it. I originally had read part of it a long time ago. I read something called Paradise Lost from Milton, actually. Milton was complicated and deep. I read him when I was about in my early 20s. But in dealing with Dante and his particular story, the joke of using the hyperbaric chamber is underrated and underused. This one, we're going into the depths of our beliefs, our faith, our idealism, and everything else to it. And of course, you're probably saying, well, good, put that into an essay. I may or may not do that. But I wanted to explain to the folks out there, I know you haven't been exposed enough to literature out there, my fellow students, my fellow chair sitters, shall I say. I have read a lot in my youth, and a lot of it went in one ear and out the other ear, except for certain authors and certain topics and subjects. When it comes down for critical thinking and trying to identify certain topics and ideas, the thing is, it takes context and it takes perspective. We each have our own. It has taken time for some of us to develop it. For very few of us, it'll take just very quickly, because something will ring, something will chime, and hopefully something will be able to motivate you enough to write and to participate in the class. I've been in your shoes a long time ago. I've been a student over 30 plus years ago. We didn't have the fun toys like we're dealing with right now. We didn't have all the material that the professor has been trying to dig up on the internet. We had it in books. We had it in plastic film sheets. We looked at drawings in major old text and dusty books. Even with that information there, it was still hard to grasp, because students of our ages during that time, mainly the teens through the early 20s, didn't have the perspective and context necessary. Of course, the school systems that we came out of tried to shove as much literature as they possibly can. The professor happened to mention an ugly word in class called politics. I call it Pandora's box. And the reason why I went off like that is because concerning about Pandora's box and our own way of trying to understand literature, sometimes they do clash with each other left and right. The sublime and the beauty, as we're looking at it. Well, we can be blinded by the surface beauty of it and not see the ugliness in it, and we can also see the sublime and not realize that there is something that's driving it that may be beautiful in one instance, but it is incapable of description at this point. There are times when we have to look beyond the ugly surface to see the surface, to see the underneath beauty of it. It's like seeing a Model T running about in the streets of Antelope Valley on some occasions, next to a Lamborghini. Lamborghini with a plastic shell on it, with a hybrid engine, or actually not with a hybrid engine, but with a hybrid performance engine in there that'll turn the Model T into basically scrap metal, just as the first green light. We can look at the difference on this one, because the Model T has character. The Model T has class. The Model T is still functioning, as long as you keep the engine running or keep up with the parts and make sure they're serviced all right. With our literature, it's the same thing for us. Servicing the literature is our own imagination and our own interpretation of what we're bringing into class. Now, the hardest thing for us to understand is the material that we've got in front of us, because some of us have never been influenced by it one way or another without us realizing it. Others we have. Others we have. The earlier essays that we've been writing about, comparing contrasts, gives us that experience. See, we can draw whatever experiences we have gone through, we have seen, we have experienced. It relates to the material that we have in front of us in one way or another. Sublime into beauty. You look at sublime and think there's something terrible or terrifying about it. Yeah, there is. Go outside in a thunderstorm, or in the beginning of a thunderstorm, just sit out there for a couple seconds, and you can see the sublime beauty of it. You can see the power, the majesty, the intensity of it. And then when you see sunlight coming through the clouds, in certain chunks of it, it makes the landscape that much more of a beauty beyond the sky. Because now you're seeing something sublime and beautiful at the same time. Of course, if you have a tornado coming out of the damn thing, then run like hell. I would cover on that one. But even looking at storms like that, I had seen Western paintings. There's the Gene Autry Western Museum out by the Los Angeles Zoo, just outside of it. They had some Western paintings of north of New Mexico, Arizona, Las Vegas. No, not Las Vegas, but Nevada. Desert regions. How those painters would go out and paint such beauty like that. Power, sublime, and yet mesmerizing at the same time. The beauty of nature, the beauty of the sky right there. Picasso, what the professor was trying to show, Picasso was also that way. You can see the reality of it. He was seeing underneath the reality of it. We look for science, we look for the physicality, we look for the skin. But in critical thinking, we have to look underneath the skin and see the circulatory system at work, the nerves at work, the muscles at work, the skeletal system at work. What's beyond that? Of course, in the scientific term, you'd say nothing. But beyond that, what our eyes cannot see, but we see it every day. We see it every single day. Ourselves. It's not the mind. It's not the squishy organ. It's not the squishy organ in here. It's getting all the inputs from the five senses. You still have that sixth sense. You still have that connection to beyond. Some people deny it. I don't. Do I know that there are things beyond our perspective, our context? Yes. From personal experience, yes. Is it more than what our brains and our minds can comprehend? Yes. lot more. That's why on some occasions I'm listening to the information that's being presented, especially when we're talking about the Mackay and how Dionysus is being presented as either a hero or a villain. Of course, this could be said for an essay as well. But for me, I'm seeing it as a little of both. Because I see two combatants going after each other. For control, for ego, for power, for namesake. Of course, yes, essays on these. Of course, the professor says, well, I could write an essay on that one too. I said, yes, but no. Because when I started getting into the Dante's Inferno, I started listening to it. Not the actual reading of the whole thing. I mean, it'll take about 6 to 7 hours to listen to the whole thing. There are things on YouTube that are showing this. I just wanted to get the cliff notes, and even the cliff notes are walking me through this. And that's what got me keyed in. That's why I had asked the professor about the hybrid on this. Because elements of dealing with a God who wants attention at this point over here, who seeks an absolute attention, in technical speaking, in theoretical and practicality, would have nothing to do with Dante's Inferno. And yet it does. And I still have to find those parts because they're singing, they're screaming at me. They're screaming from both tiers. And if I listen carefully, either I'm going to be driven mad by the muses at this point, or else I'm going to be driven more insane by getting all the't necessary. So hopefully I don't drive the professor insane. I'm not guaranteeing for the rest of the students, though. As for this weekend, as it gets closer and closer to the day of Salmane's holiday, let me remind you folks, it is not the terror that we look at the computer screens or the television screens or the movie screens that we have to be aware of when it comes down for pure terror. If you want to talk about sublime, look in the mirror. I'll give you all the terror that you need right there. And no, you don't say Candyman. You just observe for time. Of course, it may not scare the living crap out of you after that point, but you'll never know. Tuesday, guys.